what the sound is and its timbre and its dimensions kind of dictates how it works within a physical environment. I find with making music, I'm not necessarily interested in creating complex structures of music, but I'm more interested in exploring how timbre can interact over time. By pairing different sounds, you definitely pull out different personalities within music. Some objects with their own unique paths, doing little patterns in the space. Dugga, 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 dugga. My name is Jake Mayhew, and I'm a sound artist and a multidisciplinary artist living in Leeds and visiting the Funk House and Monum Studios for the first time, making what I hope will be my second LP of spatial audio music. I started making drum and bass and jungle music with a live band maybe 13 years ago. Moved on to living in Leeds, where my career as a session musician and as a producer of sort of conventional music took more precedence. I was making a lot of hip-hop and jazz music. My practice these days revolves around a modular synthesizer that I've been building since 2020. And with that machine, I've been exploring ideas of ambience and music as therapy, designing experiences that an audience can listen to and hopefully feel something unique and bespoke. At the center of my practice is an idea of play, not having complete control of a situation and experiencing the sort of excitement and danger that comes from that as well as the operator of that experience. First thing we did was listening to the quadraphonic recordings that I made at home and seeing how they translated on the system, and then that gave me some ideas as to how I wanted to stage those recordings. But then actually on the first day I think we jumped straight into the idea of making compositions in the space as opposed to bringing compositions into the space. That interaction allowed me to sort of see the potential of the system and how I can use the 4D software to augment what I can already do with the modular synth. I really like this idea of playing between different formats of spatialization as well. You feel the space change and you feel the sort of laws of that particular musical universe change as you go from track to track, as different tracks have allowed us to place sounds in particular configurations that are suitable for the work. We've presented pretty much the entire record apart from 3 tracks in somewhat augmented quadraphonic staging. Now those elements have been played with between each track, added things like the space of the room panning and rotating. If you take your quadraphonic signal, you can tilt it within the room, so then you're adding more dimensional movement to the sounds. We've had monophonic objects following paths of movement within the space. Parts of the track in the roof being bussed and sent to reverbs which open up and close at the beginning of like a drop or something. We've made risers. We've placed things tight in the center of the room or outside of the physical dimensions of the speakers, made things seem much more bigger than they are. You'll see there's a really small center here where the flies are. I don't know if you can hear them. And then as the piece of music evolves and progresses, this square here is going to grow. So I'll skip forward. The center image is now further out into the corners of the room, and more of these objects are sort of smaller and they're again tracing their own paths. and they've got their own animations. With this track as well, there's some reverb and granular synth engine running to take some of these sounds and sort of disperse and scatter them. These are these tiny little squares. This record is inspired by looking at things that are sort of present, but maybe we don't experience them without sort of further inspection. I will essentially prepare a reel or a group of sounds that work really well together, and I curate maybe 50 samples into a pack. I load that into an audio engine that can granulize sounds and repeat them and change their pitch. If you imagine a piece of audio this long, maybe a machine can just look at this tiny part of it, and then by looping it you can pull sounds out of the samples, change the speed in which it moves. Yeah, they get played in mono, and I put them through the quad panner, and then I can move them around the space and have fun experimenting with pitch and sound and timbre and movement all at the same time. The idea is to make something that has interest, right, that holds your ear's attention. The other part of the sound world is, microphone recordings as well, drum machines. Really like the idea of patterns that phase. So yeah, traditional sequencing with the modular and allowing for things to happen and them not being the same twice. Yeah, a lot of different practices over my life culminating in the record that I'm making. A lot of this record is essentially working with samples and making strange worlds in which these samples make you think about. Sounds from Leeds Festival Main Stage East, holding an electromagnetic frequency recorder up to 60 10,000 watt amplifiers. You'd be surprised what comes through those bits of technology, because there's so much power that it's pulling, it just pulls from everywhere. The stage is basically a superconductor for weird electrical sounds. I had this drone piece, and the drone piece has these insects morphing and growing, and it sounds like they're evolving. The missing part of this composition was a cymbal on a broomstick being dragged across a cement floor. I managed to tune this sample into the key of the track and then pulled out of the harmonic series a selection of notes from this cymbal, and it almost sounds like a gong or a bell or some glass being excited in the room. The whole piece of music feels like you're sat in a singing bowl. I think that's the exciting part of building universes from your own sample banks. I kind of have a sentimental attachment to what's been made on account of gathering those raw materials, and it is a photograph and you get to share that with someone else. I wouldn't have been making those pieces if it wasn't specifically for this site. Yeah, it needs the three-dimensional environment for those samples to breathe and be felt properly. At the end of this track, we wanted things to sort of melt away and disappear from the room. So you'll see now that these elements are going to start to spread from the center and float away. And you'll hear things are going to sound super distant. That's it. Something that interests me about my live performances with the modular is that not many people have seen that instrument before. Because the instrument isn't very gestural, you can leave it set up and it will play itself. People wonder where these sounds come from and where the sort of executive action happens and how much of it is me and how much is the machine, and you know, are they looking and watching an automaton, or is it more sentient than that? Those sort of questions that come to people's minds is quite fascinating, and if you can play on them preconceptions, then surely there's space to make something really, really profound in the absence of experience and knowledge and understanding. I mean, you can narrate an experience, you can tell a story with sounds, right? And you can sequence a chain of sounds that might make you experience a particular response. You know, the syncresis between visual and audio is like, that can have some amazing effects. Think about cinema, for example, and you know, sounds that don't belong in those universes, but they tell a story. But I have started learning, maybe over the past year, through help from Arts Council England, to start making stuff in Touch Designer, and then I run a laptop with my modular synth, and the laptop controls all the visual stuff and the modular controls all the audio. And essentially, the laptop and the modular synth have a little handshake, and the computer listens to controllable voltage within the modular synth, and the automation that changes the audio then changes the visuals as well. And the relationship that those two sensors impose on each other and the demand in which the visuals have can make some, you can make some interesting work. I realized at the age of 27 that I'd been farsighted my entire life. Having that realization that I had gone through 27 years of living and not seen everything, I got into the idea of inspecting things under close inspection and, you know, visually looking at things very close to my face with my glasses on to see details that had been maybe missing previously. And this idea of inspecting things carried through from the visual play of making microscopic images and playing with this idea of macrocosms and microcosms. The work became this conversation between the visual and the sensory in which we hear, and the interaction that they can have. Sort of exploring this like universal hum that happens every day that sort of we're not very aware of, and trying to make it musical. today I finished arranging and composing one of the last ambient pieces on the record. This has been one of 3 compositions that have been recorded and arranged in this space, as opposed to the other tracks in which I brought in from producing at home. It's kind of this like sub-aquatic world in which the piece of music's in, and there's lots of drones and sounds of water and movement. It tries to paint this impressionistic idea of you being under the sea, I guess. Yeah, we finished that track, and then we had a day mixing and making sure that we were happy as a team, making sure that each track, was EQ'd and leveled and sounded as good as it possibly could before we move on to the mastering part of making this album. The composition came about from working with samples, making sort of collages of different textures with sound. Those elements were put into my modular synth, and then using my amplifiers and the joystick, I spatialized these elements and recorded them within the space, panning them in real time and printing that into the computer. I did that process maybe 3 times, changing the filter of each layer in the studio. So there's the high frequencies at the top of the room, and then as you move down through the speakers in this system, the frequencies get lower and lower. Yeah, when you stack these elements on top of each other, it really creates this animated experience where you feel like you're in the center of this big whirlpool or ocean. I built this environment and thought that it would be nice to complement it with some musical tones, and came about more sort of traditional sound designing, making melodies and picking timbres that would sort of instill this stillness, as if you're in the bottom of the ocean, but having all of these crashing waves. The actual space itself, with the 4D sound software, we decided to contract and expand different sections in the music. So you got this sort of pulsating feeling of different things moving in and out of the sound field. I spent a lot of time imagining what I would do with the sound system and imagining what that could sound like. I don't know, a lot of the process is very conceptual in the pre-production and the planning of it. And it's nice to bring the conceptual into the literal when you're working with the sound system, and coming in and having the opportunity to experiment with those ideas and see what sticks and what doesn't. That's been really helpful as well. There was one track where the bass and the kick were maybe 3 or 4 semitones apart. It sounded awful, but I've never mixed this work prior to coming here with subwoofers in the room. So there was just things that I couldn't hear at all. But tuning things and having the time to listen really allows you to make better work. This record has sort of pushed me in terms of what I would consider conventional use of instruments and sounds, and yeah, this record's been really great for discovering things.
My name is William Russell. I'm the director of Monom. We are a studio exploring the possibilities of spatial sound as an expressive medium. This is essentially like a 3D representation of this speaker setup in this room. Each column here, you can see, has 3 speakers in it, one on the floor, one just above head height, and then one at the top. And this can be modular, so we can stretch it out or make it smaller or put it in different configurations. There are lots of different actually options now for speaker setups, so you don't have to change the piece and the composition, which stays the same, but you can actually put it on a different speaker setup. Obviously, the definition will be the limitation. So this is the most high definition sort of way of experiencing the software, because it has this omnidirectional idea, which is that you have equal distant the speakers in the space, so there's no sweet spot. If you're able to compose sounds in an unlimited spatial continuum, like into the distance, up high and below, so you can have sounds essentially feeling like they're kilometers or miles away as far as your perception can hear it. So this software is built by 40 Sound. This is the visualizer of the software. And then what we have, which you're able to place basically objects in the space, and each of these has a different sound associated with it. The new update of the system is now instead of just having objects, you actually create masses. And this is to mimic sort of the real world scenarios of how sound is existing. So this is like the most basic object, but already, just because of the omnidirectional nature of the space, it's incredibly realistic. So what's great about this system is the omnidirectionality extends to the fact that you can make small objects really big and big sounds really small. And so now it's playing everywhere. So you sort of feel like you're inside it. You can create paths, modulations. And this is like a spatial oscillator, so you can create like different sine wave, triangle, linear, random functions and mix them together. There's a few like basic ones like random 3D, which gives it the feeling of going randomly everywhere. Up and down also. So you can increase the up and down amount of modulation, for example, by just doing it on the y-axis. So it's going under us now. Yeah, so you'll see the 9 subs are just here. Mm-hmm. And they're evenly placed around the room to also allow you to essentially spatialize sub, which you can't hear, but you can feel. There's thousands of parameters and there's submenus within submenus. This is the basic source, and then you'll see that the sound entity has a lot more parameters. So I can take this source that I have and I can send it to one of these other entities. I'm going to make this entity kind of like go around a little bit like the wind. And so this is a spatial granulator here. So it's basically sending this one audio to all of these particles. I'm just going to break the Doppler, make the Doppler a bit more intense. Design here, whether it's like a smooth granulation, which creates this very like watery sort of feeling, because that's what's happening in nature. You're getting these kind of complex movements, which gives you this sense of like the way that wind is going through the trees, and it's so complex. It's not just one thing, and we've captured the sound of that through a mono thing, but then to replay it, you don't get the same feeling of that object. So this allows you to get the same feeling as those more complex sort of sound entities that occur in nature, or the dynamics of natural phenomena, which sound so natural to us. But then you put through abstract sounds into it, and you still get the natural feeling. Give a tool that kind of expresses in a more complex, natural way.
I used to have a studio in a chapel, and one of my favourite things to do was play my saxophone in the big room and try and paint with the reverb and add sounds over things that were taking a long time to come back to you. And love working with reverb in physical space. What's special about this record is that not many people that make electronic music get to actualize their music and record it in a physical space. It kind of exists in a vacuum in a computer, and this sort of body of work is like made with the feeling of it as in the space, as like an integral part of it. A different space is going to make you work in a very different way. If I think about all the studios that I've worked in tiny bedroom studios, home studios, professional studios, big ones, little ones. The actual space in itself and what's in the space and how the space is organized plays a big part in making music as well. Having a room like this where everything is sort of controllable and the room feels quite empty is quite nice, because I feel like I can fill it full of sounds. Different rooms make you feel and think different ways, don't they? Mm-hmm. Different wallpaper colors, different light brightness, echo sounds, different temperatures. I've been really inspired by people like Ryoji Akida, early Flying Lotus, Monolake, artists that are using the whole frequency spectrum within their compositions. You know, the very lowest of the lows and the very highest of the highest. It's between 20 hertz and, I don't know, 20 kilohertz. So having a sound system that can create all of these tones means that I can work with them as material, with sounds that are sort of on the cusp of what people are very used to hearing, and seeing how people react to them as well is kind of cool. You wouldn't expect to come and listen to like electronica or techno music and hear these like clicking noises from electrical impulses that are kind of like hi-hats but super high, and you can localize those sounds really well because the wavelengths for high frequency sound is so small. It's easy to locate them in a three-dimensional space, whereas bass frequencies that are in the sub-frequency spectrum, they're so long that it's very difficult for your ears to identify where they're coming from specifically in the room. There's different spatialities between different tracks, and yeah, I would probably encourage people to walk about and experience the mix from different places in the room. For example, if you go up the stairs, you're going to hear a lot of the buzzy 18,000 hertz clicks that I've put in the very top speakers. Or, you know, if you lay on the floor, you're going to get a lot of sub and kick drum and weight where all the body is in the work. And different objects are localized to different places, so you'll feel sounds moving around the room. And what's really quite rewarding actually is if you stand near one of the columns and then all of a sudden a speaker excites by your ears as it moves past you and you experience something move physically through you. That's kind of a really trippy sensation that you can explore an infinite amount of different ways to listen to the record by being in different localities.